Hello, good morning. This is Come Home America, episode 8 with Nick Hancock. That's me, I'm your host. And we are the podcast that narrates and navigates America's twin crises of identity and order. And this is our second episode today on Election Day. Polls have just opened on the East Coast. And I just wanted to put out something. My last video had my prediction map for 2020, so you can see that there. And I have other predictions about what might happen depending on who wins. This video is going to really help you cope with your guy losing, whoever you are. Okay, you see who my guy is up there. You see my guy, and that's fine. If he's not your guy, that's all right. He's probably going to win, so you need to watch this video. But for those of us who want Trump, we are setting ourselves up for a big disappointment too. So if he loses, let's have something to help us cope with that, and that's what this video is about. It's like a pre-cope, pre-black pill kind of video that you might need. So make this one of the videos you watch today during Election Day. But first, we have Biden's plan to assert control. And this is just astounding. It doesn't matter what was said yesterday, last week, a month ago. And they know who's driving the narrative. People who think that Donald Trump is going to pull some coup and not give the presidency up to Biden, the true winner. I don't know what fantasy world you guys are living in. You must be watching MSNBC 24/7, but I don't even think even they go that far most of the time. But it does seem like a lot of people believe that. The same thing happened in 2016 where Trump, he would not come out and say that he'll accept the results of the election. And yet what happened? It was the left that didn't accept the results of the election. Hillary Clinton didn't even address her crybaby friends that night. All those supporters who worked so hard. I can't wait to just revel in that again. I'm going to watch the crybabies from 2016 today again, just relive that. There's a great video where Murray Rothbard's laughing at them, so you should check that out. But that could be me tonight. It could be me. So understood. But what I'm getting at here is today, Biden's plan to assert control, and this is from Axios.com, so very establishment news source here, and it says that if news organizations declare Joe Biden the mathematical president-elect, he plans to address the nation as the new leader, even if President Trump continues to fight in court, advisors tell Axios. This is astounding because we have social media companies most loudly, but really all the establishment press saying, don't believe Trump if he declares himself the winner tonight. The Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever, they all claim that it's just concern for the integrity of the election, but we know it's all directed at Trump. That Trump cannot declare victory tonight, only Biden can. And that's what even the Biden campaign is coming out here with right now. This is just breaking this morning. And it says here, if Biden is declared the winner, he'll begin forming the new government and looking presidential. Biden's campaign manager says that even if all the votes aren't counted, the campaign should have, quote, a very good sense of where we're headed. We're not really concerned about what Donald Trump says. We're going to use our data, our understanding of where this is headed, and make sure that Biden is addressing the American people. So is the fix in? Is the fix in? It seems as if we need a Trump landslide to guarantee that Trump, is the actual winner. He's not allowed a marginal victory, it would seem. But then, of course, the larger margin of victory that Trump gets, I guess the more discredited the Electoral College is, right? Or the worse the riots will get, the more buildings will be burned tonight and through January. So it seems like, we're trying to enjoy it. I said in the last video that we've been fighting over who should be the next president. And tonight we're going to be fighting over who is the next president. It's going to get dicey. But you know what? I don't want to talk about any of that, actually. I'm not going to pull the book down, but you might be able to see This blue book here is my copy, and we're going to talk about this today. Garrett, the champion of the old right. And if you don't know Garrett, 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 you have got to learn about this guy. He wrote in the 40s and 50s about, he wrote a lot longer ago than that, but his writings in the 40s and 50s in particular are what we're focusing on here today. And he was anti-New Deal under FDR and a non-interventionist, against entry into World War I and II. And, Garrett is a voice we should listen to today as we prepare to hear these election results, because we all know that America is on the cusp of some historical change. That's the theme of this show. And what really got me thinking in these terms was reading Garrett years ago. And so I'm bringing him back for today. And that is that the country is changing in ways that we cannot understand right now, that we'll have to look back on to understand later. Let's do some biographical information on Garrett. Real name, Edward Peter Garrett. 1878 to 1954, born in Illinois, a 25-year-old star writer for the New York Sun, and then at age 38, executive editor of the New York Tribune after being the financial writer for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and others. He'd published 8 books before the New Deal. When he was in his mid-50s, he became the top editorial writer for the Saturday Evening Post in 1940. So now let's get into what we're actually going to read. Some excerpts from Garrett. And this collection of 3 essays is called The People's Pottage. And The People's Pottage consists of a 1944 essay, The Revolution Was, a 1951 essay, Ex America, and the 1952 Rise of Empire. And you can tell already this is not going to be like some other right-wing pundit sort of stuff you're going to be hearing about. No one has come close to what Garrett captured in this very spooky, it's just it gives you this sense of otherworldliness in his writing. It's poetic, and so at the same time that you're worried about the future of your country, you're worried about things not ever being able to made right again, loss of hope. You can look back and find other periods where there was hopelessness, and maybe that gives you some perspective. And it actually reaches, some of the writing is so beautiful, honestly. I'm going to try and convey how beautiful it is. My voice will do it no justice. You would have to read it in your own head, and so I encourage you to go out and read these and hear Garrett's voice, however that would sound in your head. I think there's recording of his voice out there, but I don't know what it sounds like. But you're stuck with me for now, but I'm going to give you a preview of some of this. And why is this important for right now? It's just because in some sense we can't take things that are tangible to us too seriously. We cannot believe that we're guarding against some revolution, that the revolution happened. And so take from this what you will. I'll build up no more. Let's start with 1944's The Revolution Was. Now remember, this is years after World War II. The U.S. got involved in early 1942, really, after Pearl Harbor in December 41. And Garrett is remembering what America was supposed to be and didn't become. So, the revolution was, Garrett writes, no politically adult people could ever have been so little conscious of revolution. Think about this today, folks. We have the word revolution thrown around, but how conscious of it are we really? Do we think of revolution as Antifa in the streets? Do we think of revolution as like the Russians taking over our elections, the Chinese invading, Mexican immigration and invasion or something? Like, what is our consciousness of revolution? Garrett continues here. The strongest tradition of subject government that had ever been evolved, that is, government subject to the will of the people, not its people, but the people. Why should anyone fear government? So this is why at the time the American people had no worry whatsoever of revolution in their society, because they had the strongest tradition of subject government, government subject to the will of the people. And that is, as Garrett says, the people. It removes, it's abstract, it's the people, and not its people. And so there seemed to be, oh, my light goes out. There seemed to be some, missed connection to the ground. Some, like, there wasn't a grounding in what was happening in the government, in the society at the time. They were stuck in these lines, these fables. In the naive American mind, the word revolution had never grown up. Definitely it meant the overthrow of government by force, and nothing like that could happen here. We had passed a law against it. So as long as you think of revolution as mere force, some like third world coup or something that just happens by sheer force, might makes right, then yeah, the United States seems to be a bulwark against that. So how could revolution happen and then just go totally unnoticed in the United States? Well, Garrett talks about the New Deal being a revolution within the form. So, in 1932, when FDR was coming into power, the Democrats promised drastic reduction and consolidation, annual balanced budgets, sound currency, and of course they went against all those things. So was it just like a politician's lie that's the revolution within the form? Could be, but really he gets into it in the sense that there are certain phrases or words that are conserved and preserved, like the Constitution, like even the word capitalism. These words are not necessarily denigrated because they're held so dearly to people, but if you can shift the definition or expand the definition beyond recognition, then people will feel more comfortable in the setting and not realize that a full revolution within the form has taken place. And going about the New Deal, in the same essay, The Revolution Was, Garrett writes that Congress did not write any of these acts. It received them from the White House and passed them. The first act, a bank holiday, keeping the rich in. The second act, gold confiscation, buying private bank stock with federal funds. And, the gold confiscation is so terrifying, a moment in history to read back and look at that. Like, most of us don't even learn about that. But making it illegal for Americans to possess physical gold, Garrett writes that made everything legal after the fact. The Congress legalized that gold theft after the fact, and it was the first use of Congress as a rubber stamp. And how often do we see that now? I mean, even in terms of wars, these endless wars. And he goes on and he lays out like 9 steps for how this revolution took place. Step number 3 was mobilize by propaganda the forces of hatred, fix the gaze on one object, leaving all others as attributes. So this focus on an enemy, and that enemy was, maybe Wall Street at the time. There was this caricature, that the free market had gotten out of control or whatever, however they would put it. But, they would use symbols and not attack beloved symbols like the Constitution. But they would ask questions like, whose Constitution is it? Oh, the Constitution? Oh, we're for the Constitution, but whose Constitution? So these questions would undermine and build up a crisis of conscience in the society. All right, so let's move on to Ex America, and this essay is 1951, so quite a few years later, and you can already sense this dread building in. And the Garrett reading, maybe I should have read the Garrett stuff on Halloween. It's just so dreadful, but I don't know. There's just something subliminal about it that I feel better after reading it. So maybe it's like listening to a sad song and you feel better, when you're depressed. When you're depressed, do you listen to, this is like teenager me asking teenager you, do you listen to sad music when you're depressed, or do you listen to dance music or something? So it's sort of like that. 1951 essay, Ex-America. Listen to this prose. Garrett writes, "The winds that blow our billions away return burdened with themes of scorn and dispraise. One wind says, 'You worship success, you Americans, and you are unable to comprehend the spiritual content of communism and are deluded to think you can shoot it out of the world.'" Incredible. 1951. And he's saying, you do not understand communism. You think it's just an economic idea, or that it's just an economic ideology, a foreign ideology that can be killed in a war. Yeah, he saw America becoming communist, and now people laugh about it. But look at Kamala Harris, our next president. Our next president, Kamala Harris, posting a video on Twitter saying that we all have to end up at the same place with the same amount of ownership, and pure communist propaganda. But in 1951, that's what Garrett saw. And you can hear upstairs. If you turn up your speakers, you can hear the wailing of the future of America upstairs. The kicking, the screaming, the wailing. That's going to be about half of the country tonight. Okay, moving on. Next year, 1952, the rise of empire. My favorite. We are building up to my favorite Garrett line, and here it is. It's a little longer, but it sets an image. It's amazing. Garrett writes, "We have crossed the boundary that lies between republic and empire. If you ask when, the answer is that you cannot make a single stroke between day and night. The precise moment does not matter. There was no painted sign to say, 'You are now entering Imperium.' Yet it was a very old road, and the voice of history was saying, 'Whether you know it or not, the act of crossing may be irreversible.' And now, not far ahead, is a sign that reads, 'No U-turns.'" No U-turns. No going back. The revolution it happened, and rise of empire is coming, And this is what we're talking about. Not a republic anymore, but an empire. And that's what Come Home America is supposed to be about, pleading for us to go back to a republic, away from an empire. It doesn't have to be going back. We can build forward in a sense. We're never going to relive the past. But in terms of the difference between a republic and an empire, Pat Buchanan lays this out beautifully, and it's just a sense of it's a shopping mall with nukes is what America comes to. I mean, I think Jose Nino wrote something like that too, or Ilana Mercer. I don't know, but we have these paleoconservative leaders talking about what an empire is, and yes, it's the overseas bases, the U.S. with 700 to 1,000 bases overseas, depending on how you count them. These never-ending wars, those are all part of the empire. But you end all that, and what are you left with? And we're still a broken country, a broken nation, because there is no cohesion in terms of identity and social order, religion, culture, language, all of these things. So we have a long way to go building ourselves out of this. But again, written in 1952, Rise of Empire. And, Garrett was kind of a bummer to read, as I say. But, was America perfect in 1939? In 1839? How far back do you go to where you say, oh, the seed of empire was planted here? Because as Garrett says, you can't really point to an exact time and day, but certainly for Garrett, it felt like it was happening in his lifetime, I would say. But writing about Garrett in his book, Ain't My America, is Bill Kaufman. And Bill Kaufman reflects on Garrett, and he does say that that Garrett wrote of Americans exchanging their libertarian birthright for consolidation and inevitably empire. So the wages of empire sooner or later are paid in blood. And Kaufman asked if it was an empire from the beginning, like empire from what, the Constitution, going all the way back. So this is a debate for another show, but just to set everything in context, we talk about the 2020 election being historical, and I do believe it is, but we have a grand history to really take into perspective here. It's not all one straight line and then falling off a cliff here in 2020. So prepare to cope. Prepare to be blackpilled. Prepare to just have hopelessness and despair, because your guy will lose tonight. And so I hope Garrett will aid you in that. You can find all of his stuff online just searching. Mises has some, Fee has some. But become familiar with Garrett. There are no U-turns. The revolution was, America's gone, and so we rebuild America. And if we could rebuild America, how would we do it? And that's what Come Home America is about. So happy election day. Get out there and vote for Trump. Or if you're a Biden voter, your day is tomorrow to vote. Biden is, if you're voting for Biden, go out and vote on November 4th. And don't forget, if you're a Trump voter, today is your day to vote. Democrats stay home today. Democrats vote tomorrow, unless you're voting for Trump. But when am I going to get kicked off of YouTube now for violating the TOS for that? We'll see. Thank you so much for enjoying this episode. I hope you did. I certainly enjoyed it. And we got more great shows coming up. A crisis of identity and order is upon us, and I couldn't be happier to journey through that with you. So God bless you. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Come Home America with Nick Hancock, episode 8, and we will see you in the next one.